The woman behind the curtain, the night air in Toronto, carried a strange chill, the kind that made even the most hardened streetlight flicker, as if uncertain of its place. A 12-year-old boy sat cross-legged on the cracked balcony of a crumbling apartment building, watching his breath fade into the dark. He clutched a dog-eared movie script in his hand, torn at the edges, stained with old tea, and held together by dreams. Behind him, the door creaked open, and a tired voice called out, softer than the wind, but heavier than the world. "Keanu," said his mother. "Patricia, come inside. It's late." He looked back and saw her face, a face that had smiled through pain, laughed through hunger, and worked through 3 jobs in a single day. Her shoes were worn, her fingers swollen from hours at the dry cleaners, her back still tense from waitressing at the corner diner. She was not just a mother. She was the reason he believed magic could still exist in a world that often refused it, but he didn't go inside. Not yet. He looked at the stars and whispered, "One day, Mom, I'll get us out of here." She didn't answer right away. She sat beside him, her apron still dusted with flour, and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Just promise me something," she said. "Don't lose who you are trying to be someone else." That line stayed with him long after the stars disappeared. Long after Patricia returned to her 3rd shift, cleaning offices after the rich had left their mess behind. For years, it echoed inside him as he rode the bus to auditions that never called back, as he stood in casting rooms too quiet for a kid with no name, and as he studied late into the night while working part-time at a bookstore. The promise he made on that balcony, that he would never lose who he was, became a compass through storms of rejection. And storms did come. At 17, Keanu got his first real audition for a local TV ad. It wasn't much, a soda commercial, but it paid $60, enough to cover groceries for a week. He waited in a room full of polished kids wearing designer clothes, each accompanied by well-dressed parents who whispered strategies and critiques. Keanu sat alone, wearing a second-hand shirt and sneakers with taped soles. He didn't speak unless spoken to. He didn't pretend to know the tricks. But when his turn came, he delivered the lines with a kind of honesty that made the casting. "Director stop mid-sip of her coffee? Who's your agent?" she asked after he finished. He shrugged. "I don't have one." She didn't call him back. Weeks later, while Patricia sat at the kitchen table paying overdue bills with tip money, Keanu told her the ad had gone to someone else. She looked at him and smiled anyway. Not because she wasn't disappointed, but because she didn't want her son to feel like a failure. She had always been his mirror, reflecting hope even when the cracks in her own soul widened. "You're not made for soda ads," she said. "You're made for something bigger. Just keep going." So he kept going. He took theater classes at night and worked at a garage during the day. Sometimes he came home to find Patricia asleep on the floor because the couch springs had finally broken. Other times they'd eat dinner by candlelight, not for the mood, but because the power had been cut again. They laughed through it. They sang through it. They survived it. Then, when he was 19, something changed. Keanu landed a role in a low-budget Canadian film. His part was small, but there was a moment, a scene where his character sat alone in silence after losing everything, that drew something out of him. The director noticed. The crew noticed. Even the camera, which often forgot people like him, lingered longer than usual. When the movie came out, it barely made a ripple in the industry. But someone in Los Angeles had seen it. A retired Hollywood agent who sent a handwritten letter to Keanu, inviting him to California. Patricia read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in her apron pocket like it was gold. "You have to go," she said. "We don't have the money," Keanu replied. "Then I'll find it," she said, standing as if gravity had no place in her world. True to her word, Patricia took on a 4th job, cleaning houses in the early mornings before her diner shift. She barely slept. Some days she didn't eat. And when Keanu offered to stay, to wait, She shook her head and said, "You go. This is your door. Don't let it close." Keanu arrived in Los Angeles with a duffel bag, a folded letter, and a heart that ached every time he remembered what his mother had sacrificed. He slept on floors, sometimes in his old car, and walked miles to auditions. He failed more times than he could count. Some directors laughed at his name. Others said he wasn't marketable. But one casting assistant saw something different in him. Something unshaped, untamed, but real. She recommended him for a role in a film called River's Edge. Keanu got the part. The movie earned critical acclaim, and for the first time, people began to whisper his name with curiosity instead of dismissal. Offers came slowly at first, then faster. But through it all, Keanu sent money back home, every week. He called Patricia every night, even when he had nothing new to say. He reminded her that he hadn't forgotten the woman behind the curtain, the one who had held up the stage while he performed. Years passed. Keanu's name grew. His face appeared on magazine covers, on posters, in theaters across the world. But the world didn't know about the woman who had mended his shirts in silence, who had walked home in snowstorms to save bus fare for his books, who had pawned her only gold bracelet to buy him his first audition clothes. He hadn't forgotten, and then it came. The day Hollywood crowned him a star. He stood on the red carpet of the biggest premiere of his career. Lights flashed, reporters called out his name, fans screamed. But as he walked past the chaos, he stopped in the middle of the crowd and turned back. Because at the far edge of the barrier stood Patricia, dressed in a simple navy blue dress and worn shoes. She didn't wave. She didn't call his name. She just smiled. And that's when Keanu Reeves did something no actor had done on a red carpet before. He walked away from the cameras, stepped through the velvet ropes, and knelt in front of his mother. He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a key. Not just any key, but one to a house overlooking the ocean. The deed was in her name. The mortgage, already paid. The walls were covered in photographs of her and him. Her favorite books lined the shelves. Her favorite music played in every room. The entire crowd went silent. Patricia looked at him, eyes wide. "What is this?" Keanu smiled, tears in his eyes. "Your dream, not mine." But the moment didn't end there. Just as they embraced, a producer stepped forward from the crowd, holding something in his hand. He walked over, speechless, and handed Keanu an envelope. "You need to read this," he said. Keanu opened it, and his face changed. It was a letter from someone he hadn't seen in 20 years. Someone from his past he thought had disappeared forever. Someone who was about to challenge everything he believed about himself, his journey, and even his mother. His hands trembled. Patricia's voice broke through the silence. "What's wrong?" Keanu didn't answer. Instead, he read the final line of the letter out loud, barely above a whisper. "You don't know the full truth, but now you have to face it." His world, once so certain, was about to unravel. A truth buried in light, the air felt heavier after the premiere, as if the applause had left behind something thick and invisible. Keanu sat in his car hours later, engine off, the letter still in his lap. His mother had gone back to her hotel room, unaware that the smile she wore all evening now sat beneath a shadow he couldn't explain. He read the letter again, each word a cut, slow and deliberate. It was signed by a name he hadn't heard in 2 decades, Alexandra Miles. She had once been a close friend of Patricia's. More than that, she had practically lived with them for a few years during Keanu's childhood. She was the woman who taught him to read plays out loud when his mother was working night shifts. She was the one who told him he could be anything. And then, one day, she vanished. No goodbye, no explanation. And now, out of nowhere, this letter. "Keanu, I owe you a truth. Your mother has protected you from it for too long. I stayed silent because I thought it was best. But seeing you now, I realize silence is its own kind of betrayal. There are things you were never told, about your father, your talent, and even your past. Meet me. I'm in Los Angeles, waiting. He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the glove box. He couldn't go home. Not yet. He couldn't look into his mother's eyes and pretend everything was okay. The next morning, he found the address listed on the back of the letter. It led him to a small bookstore tucked between two art galleries. On a quiet street, one of those places you'd walk past unless you were searching for something specific. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. Behind the counter, surrounded by towers of novels and the faint scent of coffee and paper, stood Alexandra. Her hair was gray now, but her eyes were the same. Sharp, kind, and hiding something. When she saw him, she didn't speak. She only nodded, motioning to the back of the store, where a dusty reading nook waited. Keanu followed her in silence, his heart beating louder than the footsteps he tried to quiet. "You look like him," she finally said, sitting down across from him. He blinked. "Like who?" "Your father." He frowned. "I barely remember him." "That's not by accident," she said. Patricia wanted it that way. A long pause passed between them. Keanu looked down at his hands, still unsure whether to stay or run. Alexandra continued. "Your father wasn't the man you think he was. He didn't leave because he didn't care. He left because he had no choice." Keanu looked up sharply. "He left us. He disappeared." She cried for years. "He didn't disappear," Alexandra whispered. "He was taken." The words struck like thunder in a calm sky. Taken? By who? What did that even mean? "He got involved in something dangerous," she said. "He was a brilliant man, quiet, intense, with a mind built for creating stories. He wanted to write, to direct, to tell the kind of truths that scared people. But someone didn't want those truths told." Keanu stared at her. "This sounds like a movie plot, doesn't it?" she said, leaning in. But it wasn't. And when he tried to expose what he'd found, something about a hidden deal involving land, bribes, and a production company, he vanished. Days later, your mother got a call. One warning. If she spoke, they'd come for you next. Keanu's head spun. He had lived his entire life believing his father had simply abandoned them. The pain of that betrayal had shaped everything. His loyalty, his work ethic, even his need to make something of himself. And now, suddenly, that foundation was crumbling. "Why didn't she tell me?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Because she wanted to protect your peace," Alexandra said. "And maybe because she was afraid, not of them, but of what it would do to you." Outside the window, a storm had started. Soft rain tapped against the glass like a clock ticking down a decision. Keanu stood, paced the room, then sat again. "What do you want from me?" "I don't want anything," Alexandra said. "But there's more. Your father left behind something, a notebook. Your mother gave it to me before she thought it was too dangerous to keep in the house." She reached into a small bag and pulled out a weathered leather journal bound with string. It looked like it had traveled through time, pages bent, ink faded, corners torn. She placed it on the table between them like it was sacred. What's inside might explain everything. Keanu hesitated before picking it up. When he did, the weight of it felt heavier than it should have. He untied the string slowly, like unwrapping a memory, and opened to the first page. His father's handwriting was strong, slanted, almost frantic. "If anything happens to me, this is the truth. For my son, who will one day understand that courage is not the absence of fear, but walking through it anyway." Keanu read on. Each page revealed secrets about corruption in the film industry, deals that involved silencing whistleblowers, stealing scripts, manipulating public opinion, and even threatening families. His father had uncovered it all while working as a script consultant. It wasn't just about stories. It was about power, money, silence. When he finally closed the book, his hands were trembling. Everything he thought he knew about his family, his life, even his rise to fame, it all had new meaning. "Does my mother know you still have this?" he asked. Alexandra shook her head. "No, and she might not want you to." Keanu stood up. His voice was quiet, but sure. "I need to talk to her." "Be gentle," Alexandra said. She carried this alone for decades. But as he stepped outside into the rain, something inside him had shifted. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what he would do next. The truth was heavy. But he was no longer that boy sitting on the cold balcony dreaming about changing the world. Now he had the chance to change hers. Yet as he drove toward his mother's hotel, he didn't realize he was being followed. In a sleek black car half a block behind, a man in a dark suit watched him through tinted glass. He held a phone to his ear. "He's got the notebook," the voice on the other end said. "What should we do?" A pause, then a cold answer. "Make sure he doesn't go public, no matter what it takes." The silence before the storm, Keanu didn't speak as he drove through the rain-drenched city, the journal resting on the passenger seat like a ghost. The windshield wipers moved back and forth, rhythmically slicing through the water, but his mind was far from the road. Thoughts collided inside him, memories of his mother's quiet strength, the stories she never told, the missing years wrapped in silence. The storm outside seemed to echo the one building inside him. When he arrived at the hotel, he sat in the parking lot for a long time. Above him, neon lights flickered against the wet pavement, casting strange shadows on the dashboard. He looked at the journal again. Every word inside had been written by the father he never truly knew. A man he thought had abandoned him. A man who, as it turned out, had sacrificed his voice to protect a future his son could still claim. He finally stepped out of the car and walked slowly to the elevator, floor 7. He hadn't told Patricia anything after the premiere. Not about the letter, not about Alexandra, and certainly not about the notebook. He didn't want to shatter the one thing she had spent her life building, his peace. But now, he wondered if silence was a luxury they could no longer afford. The door to her room opened before he could knock. Patricia stood there, already awake, wrapped in a simple wool shawl, her eyes tired but alert. She looked at her son for a moment, then at the soaked journal in his hand, and without asking a question, stepped aside to let him in. She sat by the window while Keanu placed the notebook on the small table between them. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Even the rain outside seemed to pause, waiting. "You know," he finally said. Patricia's eyes didn't move from the window. "I've always known." Keanu sat down across from her. His voice was soft but firm. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the truth doesn't always save people," she said. "Sometimes it crushes them. I couldn't bear to see that happen to you." He looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman who had worked herself to the bone, who had worn pain like a second skin, who had buried parts of herself to let him shine. "You've been protecting me your whole life," he whispered. "But you shouldn't have had to do it alone." Patricia's eyes finally met his. For the first time in years, they filled with tears. "I didn't know how to tell you that the man you longed for died trying to protect a truth no one wanted to hear." Keanu leaned back, his fingers running through his damp hair. "Then maybe it's time someone heard it." She shook her head, panic rising. "They're still out there. They watch. They listen. Your father tried to speak, and he disappeared." Alexandra barely escaped. "You don't understand what they're capable of." He opened the journal. Page after page of notes, diagrams, initials, and accounts. One entry, dated 3 weeks before his father vanished, stood out. "I've given a copy of everything to someone I trust. If they come for me, at least the truth won't die with me." "Did you know about this?" he asked. Patricia nodded slowly. That person was Alexandra. Keanu stared at the page, his heart thudding. Then why come to me now? Why, after all these years? His mother hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small photograph, one that looked new. In it, a man stood in the background of a red carpet event. He wasn't posing. He wasn't part of the show, but his eyes were fixed on Keanu. In the corner of the photo was a handwritten note in blocky letters. "You're not safe anymore. Keanu's." Blood turned cold. "Someone sent this to me a week ago," Patricia said, her voice barely a whisper. "No return address. No explanation." He clenched the photo tightly. Everything had been quiet for so long, buried beneath years of silence and sacrifice. But now, someone had stirred the ashes, and whatever truth his father had uncovered was no longer sleeping. He stood, pacing the room. "We can't hide anymore. Not if they're already watching." Patricia looked at him, fear behind her composure. "What will you do?" He paused, then answered, "I'll finish what he started." But before she could speak again, there was a knock at the door. They both froze. It was too late for room service, too early for checkout. Keanu moved slowly, quietly toward the peephole. Outside stood a man in a suit, calm, expressionless, holding a folder in his hand. He wasn't part of the hotel staff. "Keanu Reeves," the man said through the door, his voice muffled but clear. "I need to speak with you. It's regarding a mutual acquaintance, your father." Patricia stood up fast. "Don't open it," she hissed. But Keanu had already made up his mind. He unlocked the door, opened it halfway, and stared into the eyes of the stranger. The man handed him the folder and said, "You're being watched. So is your mother. Don't trust anyone. Not even the people closest to you." Then he turned and walked away. Keanu closed the door, locked it, and opened the folder. Inside were surveillance photos, some of him, some of Patricia, and one that made his breath stop. Alexandra, face down in an alley. Lifeless. The caption underneath read, "Terminated." Keanu staggered back, the folder falling from his hands. His mother gasped, covering her mouth. They weren't just being watched, they were being hunted. And now, the story his father had died to hide was no longer just a family secret. It was a war. Echoes of the hunted, the hotel room was silent, but it wasn't peace. It was fear holding its breath. Keanu stood frozen, his eyes locked on the photo of Alexandra lying face down in that alley, surrounded by darkness that seemed too deliberate, too staged. The word "terminated" wasn't typed like a police report or medical file. It was printed in red ink, bold, final, like a warning, or a signature. His mother sat down slowly, her body folding into the chair as if the weight of the years had just caught up to her all at once. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just stared ahead, blank and quiet, like a flame that had been suddenly snuffed out. "They killed her," Keanu whispered, voice barely rising. Patricia didn't answer. Maybe she couldn't. For the next few minutes, neither of them moved. The only sound in the room was the rain beating against the windows like fists. It was as though the world outside wanted in, wanted to witness the unraveling of the life they had protected with silence and sacrifice. Keanu finally stood and gathered the photos, the folder, the letter, and the journal. He moved with the focus of someone preparing for battle, not revenge, but something harder, revelation. He had spent his life believing that truth and goodness would shine on their own. Now he understood. Even light had to fight to stay alive in places where shadows ruled. "We can't stay here," he said quietly. Patricia looked up. "Where will we go?" "Somewhere they won't expect," Keanu replied. Somewhere quiet. We need time. We need answers. And we need to find out who sent that man. They left the hotel in the dead of night. Keanu wore a baseball cap low over his face. Patricia wore sunglasses even though there was no sun. They looked like any mother and son in an old car with too much history in the trunk. But they knew. Someone, somewhere, was tracking every movement. They drove north, staying off main highways, stopping only at gas stations where the lights buzzed and cameras looked broken. Every time a car followed too closely, Keanu turned sharply and took detours, threading through unfamiliar roads with instincts sharpened by the kind of fear that doesn't panic. It plans. By dawn, they arrived at a small cabin in British Columbia, deep in the forest, a place owned by one of Keanu's oldest friends from drama school. The friend was abroad, the place unused. It had no internet, no security cameras, no signals to intercept. It had wood, silence, and isolation. For now, it was enough. They stayed inside most of the day. Keanu built a fire. Patricia made tea like she used to when money was tight, and warmth had to come from simple rituals. They didn't talk much. Grief hung in the air. Grief for Alexandra, for the father Keanu had never truly known, for the innocence that had finally burned out. That night, while Patricia slept curled on the old couch, Keanu sat by the window, staring at the moonlit trees, the journal open in his lap again. He read until his eyes blurred, stopping at one entry that chilled him more than anything else so far. They will rewrite you. If they can't destroy your voice, they will distort it. If they can't discredit you, they'll pretend you never existed. He looked at the page for a long time. His father had written that just days before he vanished. Keanu wondered now if his own rise to fame had been allowed, even enabled, as a way to keep him distracted, silent, disconnected from the truth. He thought of the roles that had fallen into place, the doors that had opened unexpectedly, and the times he had been warned by studio heads not to get too political, too curious, or too involved in things that don't concern actors. Was it coincidence? Or was it a leash cleverly disguised as success? A creak at the back door snapped him out of his thoughts. He stood slowly, silent on the wooden floor, and moved toward the sound. The fire behind him cast a low amber glow that barely reached the hallway. He picked up a metal poker from the fireplace. Primitive, but solid. He didn't expect to need it. He hoped he wouldn't. The door creaked again, but when he opened it, no one was there. Only a small envelope lay on the porch. Keanu looked around. No car sounds, no footsteps, no signs of life in the trees. He picked up the envelope and brought it inside, locking the door behind him. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. No signature. You're looking in the wrong direction. The enemy isn't just out there. He's already inside the room. You trusted him once. Don't trust him again. Keanu stared at the message, blood running cold. It didn't make sense. No one but Patricia knew where they were. Unless... He turned to her, sleeping softly on the couch, unaware. He didn't believe she would ever betray him. Not after everything. No, the letter wasn't about her. It was about someone else. Someone he had trusted with his life. Someone who had guided his career. Someone who had always claimed to be like family. His manager, Clay Matthews. Keanu remembered the way Clay had always shown up at the right moments, when he was about to give up, when he was struggling, when he thought no one believed in him. Clay had introduced him to big studios, pulled him into the inner circle of Hollywood. And Clay had always told him, don't waste your energy on the past. Look forward. Forget the pain. Now those words felt poisoned. The next morning, Keanu called a burner phone he kept in a hidden compartment of the car. Clay answered on the first ring. Keanu, he said, voice too smooth. We've all been looking for you. You just vanished. Everything okay? I need to see you, Keanu said. Alone. Of course, Clay replied. Where? Keanu hesitated. I'll come to you, But no press, no studio heads, no entourage. "You sound different," Clay said, cautious now. "I've been reading," Keanu replied, his tone like stone. "Reading what?" "My father's journal." A pause. Then Clay answered, "We should talk soon." Keanu hung up. He looked at his mother and whispered, "This is the beginning." But even he didn't know. What he was about to uncover would not only change how he saw the man guiding his life, but would also reveal how deep the corruption ran. And at the center of it all was something more horrifying than he imagined. Name hidden in the journal, a symbol burned into the last page, and a final note his father left for him. One line. If you read this, they already know. The man in the mirror, Los Angeles, welcomed him like a mouth waiting to swallow something whole. As Keanu Reeves returned to the city he once thought was home, nothing looked the same. The billboards still wore his face, theaters still played his films, and fans still whispered his name. But beneath the surface, the streets were crawling with truths he had never seen before. Every corner felt watched. Every smile felt like a mask. And every memory came back warped, asking him to look again and ask, who had really been pulling the strings? He parked his car in a dimly lit lot beneath a downtown office building. The kind of place where ambitions were whispered, not announced. Clay Matthews' office was on the 16th floor, a clean, sleek space with cold white walls, perfect angles, and windows that hid nothing except intention. Keanu took the elevator alone. He carried nothing except his father's journal and the envelope. That warned him about the enemy within. The city rose behind him in glass reflections as he stepped into the hallway. The receptionist, unusually absent, left the door wide open. And inside, at the far end of the room, stood Clay. He was waiting with his hands folded, his eyes calm like the surface of a pond just before a storm. He didn't smile. He didn't walk forward. He simply said, "You read it, didn't you?" Keanu didn't respond right away. Instead, he pulled out the journal and laid it on the desk between them. "You knew," he said, voice low but steady. Clay nodded slowly, like a teacher acknowledging a student who had finally answered the question correctly. "I always knew." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were never supposed to ask." Keanu's hands clenched. The room felt smaller now, like the walls had moved closer the moment the truth stepped between them. "You were his friend. You worked with him, you watched him disappear, and you helped me grow up thinking he left us." "I saved you," Clay snapped, suddenly louder. "Do you think you would have survived in this city knowing the truth? Do you think any casting director would have touched your name if they knew your father was digging into the people who built Hollywood?" Keanu stared at him, stunned by the rawness beneath the calm. Clay walked around the desk now, pacing slowly. "Your father was brilliant, but foolish," he continued. "He found out things, real things, hidden deals, blackmail files, people with power who didn't want their secrets told. And when he wouldn't shut up, they made sure he disappeared. I tried to stop him, I begged him, but he chose to burn." Keanu's voice shook now, but it carried weight. "And me? What was I to you?" Clay paused, then said something Keanu didn't expect. "You were the second chance." Those words landed like a stone in still water. "I knew you were talented. I knew you had the same fire. And I knew, if we kept you focused, distracted, successful, then maybe you wouldn't follow his path. Maybe you'd live." Keanu stepped back, the betrayal stinging more because it was wrapped in a twisted form of love. "So you built my career not to lift me, but to silence me." Clay looked tired now, the mask slipping. "To protect you." Keanu looked at the windows behind Clay, floor-to-ceiling glass, the city sprawled beneath them like a kingdom built on buried bones. He reached into his coat and pulled out the last page of the journal, the one with the burned symbol and the final line. "If you read this, they already know." "Who's they?" he asked. Clay hesitated. "You already know. They own the studios, the media, the faces, the silence. We don't name them, we survive them. Keanu stepped closer. Not anymore. Clay's expression changed. For a moment, the mask shattered completely. Fear slipped through. You don't understand, Keanu. If you expose them, they won't just take your career. They'll take your name, your history, your life. But Keanu didn't back down. Then, I'll take the risk. There was a sound, soft, distant. The elevator. Clay looked toward the hallway. They followed you, he said, voice now a whisper. You shouldn't have come here alone. Keanu didn't wait. He grabbed the journal and ran toward the back stairs, ignoring Clay's shouted warnings. Behind him, the front door burst open. Footsteps, voices, commands in radios. Not police, not press. Something else. Something darker. He sprinted down 12 flights, heart pounding, each step louder than the last. He didn't stop until he burst into the alley behind the building and melted into the early evening crowd. The city was alive, blind, indifferent. No one noticed a man breathing like he had outrun death itself. He reached the car, drove without direction, then, when he was sure he wasn't followed, stopped in a quiet parking lot outside a small church. He sat there for a long time. His father had been erased. Alexandra had been silenced. And now, they had tried to corner him too. But they had made a mistake. They had taught him the cost of silence, and now he knew the price of truth. He pulled out his phone, opened the encrypted note app his father had once taught him about, a relic from the past, built for secrets. He uploaded every scanned page of the journal, every photo, every document. He drafted a message, scheduled to send to every major outlet, every whistleblower group, and several trusted friends if he didn't log in again within 72 hours. A dead man's switch, his insurance. Then he called Patricia. She answered with a trembling, "Keanu, I'm safe," he said gently. "But it's not over." She paused. "Then come home. We'll face it together." He looked at the city lights in the distance. "No," he said. "It's time the world hears the truth." But he didn't know that someone else had already activated the next move. From a rooftop across the city, a lens snapped shut. In a van parked just blocks away from where he had spoken to Clay, a figure watched footage. In silence. "He's going public," a voice said over the radio, and the reply came without emotion. "Then we go public first." Louder than silence, morning didn't rise over Los Angeles. It crept. Soft light broke slowly through a haze of smoke and fog, wrapping the city in a quiet tension. But in a modest home far from the towers of glass and gold, Keanu Reeves stood before a small mirror, tying a simple black ribbon around a bundle of worn papers. His father's journal, each page now scanned, encrypted and protected, was being sealed into a cloth pouch. His eyes looked hollow from sleepless nights, but in their depth lived something brighter than fear. Resolve. Patricia stood behind him. She had said little since his escape from Clay's office. Her silence was not emptiness, it was prayer. Prayer that maybe, for once, the truth could rise without being buried. That maybe her son could finish what the man she once loved had begun. Keanu turned to her. "When I do this," he said softly, "there's no going back." She didn't blink. Then, keep walking forward. It was her way of saying she was ready, too. Outside, a single car waited. It was not a studio vehicle, not one arranged by press agents or movie executives. It belonged to a former investigative reporter named Jessica Malone. She had built a reputation for exposing untouchables, until she got too close to the truth and was pushed out, blacklisted, and left with only one weapon left: her voice. Keanu slid into the passenger seat and handed her the pouch. "You're sure?" she asked. "Every name, every file, every transaction," he said. "My father wrote it all down." "Then they'll come after you." even harder than before. He looked out the window. They already are. They drove in silence, toward a hidden recording studio in Santa Monica, a place Jessica trusted, equipped with secure connections and physical tape backups. Keanu didn't want the story released by press outlets that could be paid to bury it. He didn't want it filtered through headlines or reworded by editors. He wanted to say it himself, raw, unedited, real. Inside the studio, the lights were dim. Jessica hit record and stepped back, letting him sit alone before the mic. Keanu took a deep breath. Then, with no fanfare and no preamble, he began. "My name is Keanu Reeves. I'm an actor. But before that, I was just a boy raised by a woman who worked herself to the bone so I could dream. And before I was a dreamer, I was the son of a man the world tried to erase." He spoke for over an hour. He spoke of his father, Thomas Reeves, and the journal he left behind. He named the companies that buried scandals. He described the executives who stole stories, threatened creators, and silenced dissent. He listed the payments, the blackmail, the disappearances, backed by dates, files, and hidden recordings from decades ago. He spoke of Alexandra, of her death, of the warning that led him down this path. And finally, he said the words that had once terrified his mother. "I'm not afraid anymore." When the recording ended, Jessica saved it on 3 drives. One was hidden. One was set to auto-release online at midnight. The third was for Keanu to keep. But by the time they stepped outside, the storm had arrived. 2 black cars blocked the exit of the studio alley. 4 men stood waiting, silent, composed, dressed like they belonged to no agency, no country, no name. They didn't point guns. They didn't shout. One simply stepped forward and said, "Mr. Reeves, come with us." Keanu looked at Jessica. She gave the smallest nod. She had already uploaded everything. He smiled, not out of defiance, but freedom. "No," he said. "We're done here." He turned away and walked. The men didn't follow. They didn't need to, because within 20 minutes the audio went live. It spread like fire, first on a quiet forum for truth seekers, then to social media, then to underground news platforms. Within an hour, hashtags exploded. Downloads surged. Whistleblowers from decades past came forward, recognizing names and patterns they had once tried to warn the world about. Journalists demanded investigations. Old case files were reopened. Hidden settlements came to light. Keanu Reeves didn't break Hollywood, he unmasked it. By nightfall, his publicist quit. His management team issued a no comment. Sponsors pulled endorsements. Major studios issued vague statements about respecting freedom of speech while denying allegations. Some said he had lost his mind. Others called him a hero. But Keanu didn't flinch. He returned home to his mother, unplugged the phones, and made tea. "It's out now," he said, sitting beside her. "The world decides what happens next." Patricia looked at him with soft pride. "Your father would have been proud." And just before they turned off the lights, she handed him something he hadn't seen before, an old cassette tape, labeled in his father's handwriting, for when he's ready. Keanu placed it in the tape deck. A soft click. Static. Then a voice. His father's voice. "Hey kid," it said, rough and warm. "If you're hearing this, then you found it all, and you didn't run." A long pause. "I hope you've kept your heart open, because that's what they fear most. Not the truth, but the people who tell it with kindness." The tape ended in silence. No music, no closing line, just breath, life, real. The next morning, Keanu Reeves walked into the sunlight. Not as a movie star, not as an icon, but as a son who had finished a journey that began before he could even understand it. And somewhere, beyond the noise of headlines and flashing cameras, a boy in a small town picked up a pen, inspired. Because sometimes the loudest sound in the world isn't applause, it's truth.